Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, back with another deck profile, this time featuring Granblue. So, in a similar case to the Link Joker Glendios deck profile, this is me flying solo again, featuring a deck that isn't a Paladin deck, but one that I play a lot because it's my favorite for the entire clan. It was a Night Rose, Beatrice, Cocytus, Negro Bolt, none of those, no. I'm really into Pinot Noir especially. The reason being that compared to a lot of the other Granblue decks, this one doesn't aim to just kill you immediately and just ride the hope train. No, instead this is definitely a grindy kind of deck that's more about attrition and carefully planning out your resources and attack methods. And I really appreciate that. It's a more skill-based Granblue deck, so I decided to try and maximize it as much as I can. There's been a fair bit of it on stream. I've used it in a couple videos here and there, so I definitely do prefer this deck. It's pretty well proven. It's not a top tier contender by any means, but it's certainly not low tier either. It's got a lot of formidable aspects to it, which I'll go over as we explain the deck list. Of course, if you just want the list, well, here you go. I also have a deck code in the description as per the standard. But for those of you who wish to stick around for my explanations and analysis, then please do so. And without further ado, let's begin. So starting with grade 3s, of course, the main man himself, Pinot Noir. Really, there's not too much to say about him that you couldn't just read from his text. Now, he's been out for a little while, so I'm not going to read his skills line for line. But let's just sum it up as for every 3 of your triggers, you give 5k to the front row, and he gets a pseudo, almost Granblue style twin drive on top of his normal twin drive by dumping them to the grave and activating their trigger effects. Note, this is all their trigger effects. So you get the power, and you do get the additional benefits, whether that be draw, critical, what have you. Now, this is a very powerful skill. Of all the Granblue decks out there, none of them really can dig for triggers the way this deck can, which is really nice. Plus, when you're milling cards, there's always that sense that when you're milling triggers, it sucks, doesn't it? It's really bad. It's so sad. I mean, just take, for instance, a Sea Skeleton Navigator. You know, you're happy. You've got your best miller in the clan. You turn that puppy sideways with another booster. You mill 5, and oh, all triggers. What a ginormous letdown. Right, fellas? Not in this deck, though. In this deck, that's actually where you get a lot of your power from. So it's the interesting reversal from a lot of other Granblue strategies that clearly, as time goes on, you're going to build up more and more of your power, and it becomes almost hard, like too hard to guard for most decks once you've hit your maximum threshold, which, for reference, is 15 triggers. Most of the time, you're not getting that. You're going to get more around the ballpark of 9 to 12, but it's still a possibility that's worthy of consideration. Anyway, because of the skill in tandem with the grade 2 that we're going to talk about, this is a 5 attack clan, so that's a good point of reference. If you're, say, getting 15 to 20k power, a total of 4 potential drive checks, and it's on 5 attacks, there's a fair bit of offense here. Not the greatest offense in the format, but it is most certainly formidable and up to snuff with what a proficient protect clan should be capable of. Speaking of which, when we go into the grade 2, I'll also mention it there for the prominent reason, but I'll just say straight up, Protect 1 versus Protect 2 is an interesting debate in this deck. Particularly when it comes to your matchups. See, the rule of thumb is, I go with Protect 2, but if the opponent has a means of removal, then I go for Protect 1 anyway. But excluding that, or I guess in the Dimension Police matchup where PG equals life, I'm going to go with Protect 2 because the shield value there is going to be so vast because this is a Granblue deck, so you're always able to revive your units. Anyway, yeah, Pinot Noir, pretty skillful. He's got a lot of power that's up to snuff, but it takes a little while to build up to his full potential. And so with that said, don't expect a quick game with it, and yeah, let's move on. So, moving on from Pinot, we've got, of course, Skull Dragon, potentially the best card in the clan, although that's debatable with things like Greed Shade, Columbard, and what have you. I mean, the only thing I have to explain about Skull Dragon, guys, is not its inclusion in this deck. That's pretty freaking obvious. It's in every Granblue deck just about, excluding probably, like, Negerbolt. It's, why is this 2 copies? Well, you see, the interesting thing about it is, unlike something more uninspired like Night Rose, this deck actually has a lot of different potential options for how it wants to approach combat. You don't always try to just beat them down with Skull Dragons and call it a day. And in fact, you probably only really need like a Skull Dragon or two in the front row, which, yeah, you'd say again, okay, there's both Skull Dragon in the front row. Why you only have two? Well, it's because you don't need it. We also have other offensive options. We have the one-up boat down here. We have, of course, our Blancs, which are going to be on the field all the time, just about. And you could have other stuff. You could have your Beatrice being a beater, you could have other grade 2s being a beater. There are a lot of beaters. You don't really need this massive power. Now, of course, you could bump it up to 3 if you want. I wouldn't say no to that, but I had to make a lot of space in this deck. If you wanted to cut something, then definitely consider cutting one of these grade 1s, because the grade 1 pool I went with is fairly large. It's larger than the normal amount, excluding things like Luard. So yeah, I run 2 just because I haven't had much of a problem with it, not too much of a need, but if you're a Skull Dragon goon, then just go ahead and bump it up where you may. Next up, we've got one Beatrice. So Beatrice, obvious reason for this, right? You Soul Blast one, you call something else out when it like comes to the field. Now, this isn't multi-attack in this deck. This is more just to gain you resources, which is why it's just a convenient one of. It also draws from Soul Blast, which can be a little bit oof if you're constantly using Pinot Noir's skill, but you generally have enough in the tank to feel this a couple times, and that's going to be very important, because as we move on from this Reviver, we get immediately into Pinot Blanc. Now, I've been insinuating this for a few things. Everything around the deck is going to be centered around the Legion pair, of course, and the grade 2 in particular is fairly specific in how it operates. So, when your Pinot Noir swings, you counterblast when and retire rear to revive from the drop and call itself, right? Furthermore, not only can it not be attacked, but it gains 5k shield for every 3 triggers in your drop. This is a pretty crazy card when you break it down. Of course, CB1 and retire for multi-attack is good because it's paired with a draw and you're still just replacing it. So it's a +1 and multi-attack for a CB. That is great, especially when you're pairing it up with another copy. That means that your attack pattern will be rear, rear, van, and then call 2 Pinot Blancs to make them also swing for a 5-attack turn. That's how the 5 attacks work. Now, it's kind of rough in other areas, because by retiring a rear, that means you need to invest a rear that's going to stay on the field. That means that Skull Dragon and Boat aren't good targets. You'll need back row to retire off of that. But that's why Beatrice is good, because Beatrice just revives something else and she can stay in the back row as fodder if need be, if she's reviving something that's bigger than her. So that's easy enough. You don't even really need to consider that too much. One cool fact is, of course, the shield value. The shield value means that because of her revival effect, you can have anywhere from plus 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus shield at you every turn, depending on how much triggers you've been milling and how many of these you revive out. This is an incredible defender. One of the main reasons why Pinot Noir is so tanky. It has a consistent access to a shield here. This as an interceptor is especially devastating, because when you put it with Protect 2, the main reason why I would suggest Protect 2, it becomes essentially a 1-card guard. Against most things, it's a 1-card guard. And you would say, oh, well, Protect 2, if they have removal, then you're kind of screwed. Yeah, don't do Protect 2 if they have removal. But if they don't have removal, then no need to fear. This thing can't be attacked anyway, so literally they won't be able to get rid of it. So yeah, you're good to go at that point. There's not much else to say with Blanc. Do note, though, I'm running 4, you have to run 4, not just because it's an essential piece, but also because it's just got every bit of utility you need. It's got the advantage, the shield, the multi-attack. It's all rolled into one package. You just have to run all the blocks that you can. And note, when milling, try to prioritize getting at least 1 block in there. There have been games where this deck doesn't mill very fast, so you need to at least get 1 block, otherwise you don't have any multi-attack, and that's Sagers. Alright, Greed Shade. Greed Shade is, of course, a Granblue staple. I don't think anyone's going to bat an eye at for Greed Shade. You literally just pitch a card, mill 2, add a card from drop back to hand. It's one of the best filters and mills in this game's history. Plus, it gets 5k, meaning that it's a nice beater. When you're pairing it with, say, a 10k from the front row with Pinot Noir, it's suddenly hitting over defenses, which is fan-freaking-tastic. So, in all honesty, I would just say that Greed Shade, I don't even know why you would play less than 4 Greed Shade unless you're really trying to fit in some cool tech pieces. At bare minimum, try to run like 3. I'd say you never know when you have something in the hand that's hanging around where it shouldn't be. Skull, dragons, boats, hell, even Blancs, just to set up the multi-attack. It's just that omni-purposeful. 3 Colombard. Why 3? 2 reasons. One, I had to make some space, and I felt that the other 2 grade 2s were just way more important than Colombard. Colombard is a nice +1, but you have a few different means of plussing in this deck. It is a searcher as well, but you know what that search comes with? It comes with a counterblast. Why is that so devastating? Well, ideally, you're probably CBing 1 or 2 every turn with Blanc, more often than not 2. That's a lot of CB to go through. So, I've encountered a lot of CB problems when I've been using Colombards and the Blancs in a single turn. Generally speaking, if you're not constantly receiving damages or countercharges, you're going to stall out at some point, and that's bad in a deck that's meant to grind. It's one thing if you're going super hard, heavy, and want a quick game plan. That's not this deck, though, so you have to watch out for your countercharges. So yeah, only 3 Colombard. You can bump up the 4, of course, if you find you need more searchability in the deck. I didn't personally, but yeah, even at 3, he still pops up plenty of times, and he's also a fantastic ride. Now, the 1 Ghost Ship. In a very similar argument to Skull Dragon, you don't really need Ghost Ship because you're always swinging for big numbers, but it's a nice thing to circle through because you can keep on getting the draws and the +15s. That's always nice. One issue I found with Ghost Ship is, of course, it's retiring itself, so you need the boosters behind it to act as fodder for Pinot Blanc, but that's not much of a skill. I mean, not skill, detriment. The draw, is it good? Is it not? Of course it is. Like, why do we even debate? The draw is, of course, very good, but after a certain point, you're going to be running into deck out because this is a grindy mill deck, so watch out about these draws. There's no reason why I only have it a 1 of because you don't necessarily need to spam it. Can it be a 2 of? Sure. If you did make it a 2 of, again, I direct you to the plentiful amount of grade 1s here for you to take off a copy or 2 in order to raise up boat. But I've only needed 1 boat in my playthroughs, so yeah. Alright, grade 1. We got Siege Banshee. It's the one that came with the Pinot pair, so of course it's probably catered to them, and it certainly is. Place on Van, you search a deck for any card and discard it, shuffle your deck. Easy enough, right? Most Granblue decks at this point I've seen run this because not only is it just a fantastic ride, but the second skill, which mills a couple cards and potentially nets you a draw, that's just amazing good stuff. It is a Granblue staple for the most part. Now, you don't necessarily have to run it. Granblue is known for having a lot of pretty solid grade 1s, but I still run it a lot. After all, let's notice a pattern here. What actually mills you cards? We've got Noir himself, but conditional on getting Blancs out. We have Greed Shade. That's also a mill too. And yeah, that's it. So we need the 4 Siege Banshee to keep on having the mills just cycle through the deck, get you more triggers, get you more pieces. All in all, an immediate 4 staple, in my opinion anyway. Okay, Tommy the Ghosty, 3 of. Was running this at 4, decided to cut a copy in order to bump up Cutlass to 4. We'll get into him later. Tommy's still coming up plenty at 3. He's just a grade 3 searcher. There's not much else to say. He's also a 13k booster. Also really nice. Yeah, really, if you want to talk more about Tommy the Ghosty Brothers, go find a Ghosty deck profile. He's a lot more interesting there. Negrabone, also a Granblue staple. Running 3 because 4 is nice, but you don't really need more than a couple to keep in circulation. After all, discarding cards to give pluses is nice, but this is not Night Rose we're talking about, so you may actually keep some cards on the field after a turn, and this will become kind of redundant afterwards. You generally don't necessarily want to neg in the hand for a break even to the field. It's still really nice though. I think at 3 it's the perfect number. It pops up just enough without being too crowded in your deck. Alright, Cutlass. What to say about Cutlass? It's kind of an old school countercharge for V-era Granblue. Some people have abandoned this for King Serpent, although not much, mind you. Other people have just abandoned it for no countercharge, alternatively. Countercharge, though, is very important in this deck. I've already stated before, the reason why, well, one of the reasons we have Columbar 3 is because we have 4 Blancs, 2 of which will be potentially CBing 1 apiece every turn to enable the 5 attack multi-turn. So when you've got that going on and you're turboing through 1 to 2 CB every turn, you're going to need yield countercharge. Cutlass is a fantastic way of getting these countercharges. And not only does he get you countercharges, but for no neg except for 1 in your drop zone, like literally just 1 down in your drop zone, you get a +1 in addition to a countercharge. That is great. Not only is that +1 is just, plussing, but conveniently, all you need to do is then retire it off the skill of Blanc, which means it's back in the grave, and it can countercharge you some more on the next turn. They work so in sync together, especially since, as I mentioned before, we've got Skull Dragons and ships, which are going to get rid of themselves at the end of the battle phase. So your front row is like empty and all, but now you need to rely on the back row to get something out there, presumably. This is perfect back row fodder. It's already boosted. It's not even that big, so you don't really need it for stats or anything like that. It's about as good resourcing as this deck can provide. I just had to run him at 4. I used to run him at 3, but there are just those situations where even 3 is not enough, because when you need to go greedy and you need to go fast, but you didn't kill that turn, but you've buttered him up, you don't want to sit there and look like you got egg on your face because you've buttered up the opponent only to not be able to follow through on the kill turn due to lack of CB or resources. So yeah, for Cutlass, that's just how I like to play it. Adding Zombie, starter, you pick yours. I like this one because Grenache is already a Night Rose 1. Night Kid is like a Cocytus 1. Beatrice, well, you just do whatever for Beatrice. I think Guiding Zombie is just fine for this one. You pick yours though. Siege Trolling Banshee, 4 of Heal Trigger, just Heal Guardian. This deck runs a little bit slower than normal, so if you're having to go second, this is a godsend to not just get beat out too quickly. 4 Crit Sentinel. It's a Protect deck. Regardless of whether you're doing Protect 1 or Protect 2, you're still going to want Rampage Shade. Because if you're using Protect 1, then, well, you got Protect 1s as your Sentinel. If you're using Protect 2, and it's not against something like D-Police, then more than likely, you probably don't even need the Protect 1 that much. And so a Rampage Shade should service you well enough in addition to those huge-ass intercepts. So yeah, 4 Rampage Shade, plus the added crits is just super edgy and dangerous when you're trying to do the quote-unquote 4 drive checks of Noir. Your opponent will never know when they're just going to get crit to death so hard, so like early on, or even later on for that matter. And then of course we've got 8 more crits on top of that. So it's a 12 crit 4 heal deck. Pretty standard for a Protect deck these days. Some Protect decks will go for the draw PGs, but excluding that, it is like a 12 crit 4 heal a la Oracle Think Tank or whatever. So yeah, that's going to be the Pinot Noir deck profile. I saw some deck profiles online, so this isn't some completely untouched deck. It's been around for a while as well, albeit there's no real competitive success. So what I say here isn't exactly new theory, but that aside, I think it was nice to get a touch up on it because it is my favorite Granblue deck profile, and I think it doesn't get enough credit as a deck for being relatively unique and has its own niche within the clan. After all, for all we know, the game could turn into a slower format, and when it turns into a slower format, then Pinot Noir can definitely surface up and do a lot of damage. There is Ghosties. Ghosties also have a fair bit of multi-attack, and they're tanky as hell because of the extra shield value added to Ghosties. And Ghosties actually do have some amount of relevance right now due to how they're able to handle Steam Maiden. That aside, I think this deck is somewhat on the Ghosty level. You could play it like how you play Ghosties, but it aggressively mills, so you wouldn't want to do the draw triggers like Ghosty. You do want to maintain the crit triggers. So if you want a more aggressive version of Ghosties, with higher power thresholds, then yeah, go for Pinot Noir. He's his own nice balance in the clan, and I think in terms of where he stands as a deck, I'd say he's somewhere in between tier 2 and tier 3, closer to tier 2. He can contend with some pretty tough boys, not the biggest boys in the format, but he can contend with some pretty tough stuff. Just note, when in doubt, be patient with the game. Don't throw away all your resources immediately and ignore your defense. You never know when you're not going to be able to kill your opponent in a turn, and you got to be able to take advantage of this deck's greatest strength, which is the game time. Being able to wait it out, hold off a turn, build things up. This deck is a hard nut to crack when you are super efficient with your guards. Alright, I think that's about it. If there's anything that I missed about this deck, perhaps any sort of tech cards that you'd want to suggest. I know things like Branded Francis, King Tentacle, those things are pretty cool techs. Even the new King Serpent might be an interesting tech in this deck if you need even more countercharge. Jesse the Ghosty, for that matter, for countercharge. There are definitely good countercharge options. Let me know all that in the comment section below. Also, just to be completely transparent, this is a relatively new thing I've been doing deck profiles. After all, your boy isn't super rich. He can't afford a bunch of IRL cards. But if y'all don't really like these deck logs and want me to go back to in-person deck profiles, let me know. It won't be as often that I'm doing in-person deck profiles, but I will be doing them if that's what the audience prefers. So give me your honest criticism down below. Perhaps even if I just could improve these deck log videos rather than just scrap them outright. And if you would like to see more Vanguard content, well, I've got a nifty subscribe button down there. There's also a neat notification bell that'll let you know when the next time I upload is. I do a lot of different Vanguard type content. You got tier lists, discussions, and other such videos. So yeah, go ahead and check them out. And with that, take care, and God bless.